Hey everyone, and welcome to the Queer Culture Club, our monthly short format interview series that focuses on LGBTQ people who are defining the queer culture of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. My name is Terry Beswick, and I'm the host and moderator of the Queer Culture Club. Every second Thursday monthly, we interview queer culture makers, including authors, playwrights, historians, activists, artists, and archivists, to learn about their work process, inspirations, hopes, and dreams. And tonight, I'm delighted to have a very special guest, Cal Callahan, the district manager of the Leather and LGBTQ Cultural District. Established in 2018, the district is one of three LGBTQ-related cultural districts in San Francisco, along with the transgender district in the Tenderloin and the Castro LGBTQ Cultural District. So we're going to bring on Cal Callahan. Cal uses he, him pronouns, and he's not a Bay Area native, but after 40 years may be considered a permanent transplant. A veteran of HIV/AIDS action, he has worked in the nonprofit sector for 25 years and is currently the Leather and LGBTQ Cultural District Manager. He lives in Oakland with his husband, Richard. Hey, Cal. Nice to
Hey,
see
Terry.
you.
Same here.
How's it going?
Good, good. This is fun. The district was a co-host of the very first Queer Culture Club episode, so coming back as a host feels really special.
Oh, that's
You
right.
guessed
Yes,
right.
we did the book talk with Mark Chester about
Yeah,
his new sex series. Yeah, that's awesome.
exactly.
Yeah, thanks for helping with that.
Of course.
Yeah, and we only have like a half hour for this show. Of course, it's a short format, and it's kind of intentional. So there's so much for us to talk about. But I do want to, before we get started, I do want to encourage our viewers tonight to go ahead and post in the chat. And we've got Lee Pfeffer in the background who will pluck out any questions or comments that you have from the chat and post them for us to see, whether it's on Facebook or on our live stream. So with that, Cal, let's get into it a little bit. And
Sure.
and I kind of want to talk about the history of the Leather Cultural District, which really preceded the Leather and LGBT Cultural District, didn't it?
Yes.
And also what's going on with the present and what you foresee in the future. But maybe you can tell us just a little bit about what are cultural districts and what is the LGBTQ and Leather Cultural District?
Sure. Yeah, there are currently 8 cultural districts in San Francisco. They were formed in various orders. There's a couple that have been around for a number of years, like Japantown and Calle 24. And some of us who are more recent, as you mentioned, we've been around 2 or 3 years. The Castro District and the American Indian District are the newest. And all of the districts were established by the Board of Supervisors to really address the increasing gentrification and displacement of marginalized communities within the city. So each of the groups, including the Leather community, were identified as important parts of communities that are integral to San Francisco, but who are in danger of being pushed out, and have already been to large degrees.
Right, great. Yeah, so it's really a groundbreaking framework that was passed by the Board of Supervisors and led by activists uh, to um, uh, to do this work, to do this cultural preservation
Yeah,
and historic
yeah,
commemoration, but really to counter the effects of urbanization that seems to be happening not just in San Francisco but in cities around the country,
that's right.
um, and is impacting LGBTQ communities as well as racial and ethnic communities in San Francisco in particular. So yeah, thank you very much for plunging into this work.
Yes.
I think each cultural district is different in that, some of them are about trying to establish, a cultural district that's largely been lost. For example, I'm thinking the transgender cultural district, create opportunities for housing and employment for transgender people there, and in particular, and to create art. And others, like the Castro, is like there is a living, thriving LGBTQ cultural district, but it is being lost and displaced. And leather seems to be somewhere in between. Is that right? But talk to me a little bit, about what was the leather community like in Soma during its heyday compared to now?
Yeah, and San Francisco in many ways was, well, as we say, at the cradle or maybe the sling of the leather movement throughout the world, really, not just the country. And much of the culture, as it evolved, originated here, starting in the 60s and 70s, really hitting its height in the late 70s and 80s. In the 1980s, the Soma neighborhood, along within a couple blocks of what used to be called the Miracle Mile, which was Folsom Street, there were 50 businesses, depending on how you want to count them, that were queer-owned or catering to a queer clientele. That, because of displacement, for example, the old Toolbox, one of the early leather bars, is now a Whole Foods. And I think in many ways that tells the story of what happened with this neighborhood. That bars and businesses were pushed out as development found this a rich and ripe place to move in the city. So over the years, those 50 have declined to, well, the beginning of 2020, we were down to 14 businesses that were queer identified, and we lost 2 of those during COVID. So it's very much on our minds, not just to preserve what we lost, and that is a major part of what we want to do, but to make sure we don't lose more and to set the stage for other businesses to come in.
Yeah, so I'd like to talk a little bit more about how that development that is, whether it's a business or a housing development that's coming in and is displacing housing, or more importantly, I think for the leather cultural district, businesses that serve the leather community. How we can take that and turn it around and exact some concessions from those developers. So I'd like to talk about that. But first, maybe you could, I think your personal history is probably very much tied to this history as well. But maybe you could just talk about where you came from and how you came to be drawn to this particular work right now.
Yeah, without repeating your rendition of my bio, I am from the East Coast originally, but I've been here decades. I've volunteered in one capacity or another since I was in my teens, whether that was politics or environmental or gay liberation issues. Volunteering has been a key part of my life and became even more integral in the mid-'80s during the height of the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And I really spent most of my time volunteering. I mean, I basically worked so that I could volunteer. And in the mid-'90s, I turned that into a career. So I've been working in nonprofits for 25 years.
And that the fundraising for AIDS-related nonprofits is definitely intersects with the leather community at many levels. And I'm thinking of, in particular, like AIDS Emergency Fund and groups like that. But a lot of fundraising.
And I worked at the AIDS Foundation, and I was at the AIDS Emergency Fund for a number of years, including with their merger into PRC.
Right.
That kind of renewed my passion for community organizing and community events. So when the position with the district came open, and my predecessor, Beth Hunt, is a good friend of mine, so I knew what she was working on. And when this was coming open, it's like this was where I wanted to be.
Yeah, well, that's great. It seems like a wonderful match. Before we start hacking away at the developers a little bit more, maybe we can talk about let's and maybe Lee, maybe if you could bring up the map of the district. But Cal, can you talk to me about the map, because I remember the conversations about what the geographics of the map ought to be, and to a certain degree, I think it is important, what the boundaries are, although it certainly goes beyond that. And I think it was based primarily on existing businesses more than historical differences that may have historical businesses that may have been outside the boundaries that are established. But can you talk to me about that and about what prior businesses might have been outside the map, and
Yeah,
what have been lost since the district has been formed?
Yeah, the map is based on the extant businesses because the last 15, 16 months, a lot of our focus has been on helping these businesses survive, leading them to loans and grants and writing support letters and doing what we could to keep them going, especially as they went online and amplifying their events. But originally, this was the boundaries are drawn. We're kind of carved out of Soma Pilipinas, so we share a lot of territory with them. We also share a lot of history, and the story of the Filipino community being displaced is very similar to the story of the leather community, and is actually quite tied. The original Folsom Fair was not a leather fair; it was a anti-gentrification fair, and the name this year, Megahood, harkens back to that. So, the district was really based on what now needs to be preserved. Mm-hmm. In terms of commemoration, we're not necessarily tied to these boundaries. For example, I mentioned the toolbox and some of the other bars, and establishments were outside the boundaries. We do have a plan to, and Lee, if I can have the sidewalk plaques, which we're really quite proud of. In the next year or two, we'll be placing sidewalk plaques both at present and past sites of key businesses, in our history. Thank you. And again, this is part of the commemoration. But also, we want people to know they're in an important district, and there's a history here that they should know that history is a living history. There are businesses here that we intend to help thrive, and we want people coming into the district, to do that. And this is one of the pieces. And Lee, I think I have the light poles as well. So these placemaking projects are really incentivizing people to come in. One of the key projects that we are working on is a business incubator. So now that as things open, to help new businesses, new entrepreneurs get their bearings, get help navigating the system, have experts in the field come in to help them and to fill in these gaps. And that's I think a very important piece of us moving into the future and taking the district into the future.
Yeah, and I know that recently, and actually somebody was just putting me in touch with one of the former owner of Blow Buddies to look at some artifacts from that business for our archives and collections. Because I mean, I have a fantasy about our new museum that's going to have a leather room that's very immersive. A kink room that
Nice.
that tourists will be able to enjoy, and we wouldn't have some actual artifacts from a business, but we might be able to reproduce them for that purpose.
Right.
But yeah, we unfortunately did lose Blow Buddies, and I believe the Stud just during the pandemic. Yep. And were there others? I don't know if there were other leather or queer businesses.
Blow Buddies, was I think our biggest loss during the pandemic. In fact, on the map, the reason there's that kind of enclave to the east or to the northeast was because that was the block that Blow Buddies is on. Right. End Up is still there, right. So that there is still an extant business there. Right. But the other business, which fortunately reopened but not in the district, was Cake Gallery, the X-rated pastries.
Yeah.
that were on 8th Street, I believe.
Okay.
And so, those were the two that did not make it through.
Well, maybe Wicked Grounds could carry some of their pastries or something.
That would be fun. That'd be very fun.
Yeah, I was really glad to see that Wicked Grounds was able to survive and carry on.
Yep.
Are there any new businesses that have formed or are coming? I mean, everyone's focused on the ones that are reopening right now, of course. That's the
Yes,
main focus.
exactly. None that are specifically queer related. There are a couple of businesses that were being planned prior, and a new high-end restaurant on 11th Street, for example, a new nightclub on 11th Street where Slim's was. But they're not queer identified, so we wouldn't have as direct a relationship with them.
Okay. And so more to come on that. I mean, I think it's so important. Yeah, so important to keep in mind that the focus of the cultural district it has many components or many facets to it.
Indeed.
And living culture and living businesses, for living people, I mean, is certainly a focus. But there's also the historic commemoration so that it's not forgotten.
Indeed.
And so can we talk a little bit about that? I know that I was so excited before the pandemic. Of course, we had the Leather Memorial Walk on the infamous Ringgold Alley.
Yes,
Oakland,
yes.
And
we still hear stories about the exploits that took place there.
Well, I remember them. But yeah, I mean, but it's fun to walk down because, of course, it's not just commemorating the Ringgold Alley's history, but the whole leather cultural
Yes,
district, right?
definitely.
And actually, that's an example of, there was a development going up, and I think it used to be a Muni parking lot adjoining the alley, and as part of the concessions or the mitigations of putting this property up, activists, including Gail Rubin and others, were able to extract their financial support for the creation of the Leather Walk or the Leather Memorial Walk, right?
Yeah. Yes, and Eagle Plaza is very similar in its origins, and I think those are two very good examples of current placemaking projects. And you're absolutely right about how the city does have a vast array of user fees for developments that are coming in, and some are diverted to the cultural districts. We're anticipating that the sidewalk project will be at least in part funded by that.
So now when a new developer is wanting to come into Soma, particularly within the boundaries of the Leather Culture District, do they have to come to you?
They don't have to, but that planning commission is pretty good about that.
Okay.
Some developers are better than others, obviously. I mean, I think that's true across the board, or more, let me say, more easily conversed with, and we'll do more concessions. One thing that has been an issue for a while that we're working on with developers is kind of a reverse NIMBYism, where the folks who are moving into our neighborhood don't necessarily know what they're moving into, the history, the culture, and there have been difficulties with existing businesses. We have nightlife. We also have industrial businesses that are clattering in the morning, and then the bars that are playing music at night. So part of what we're working on and trying to codify actually with the city is to make sure that this information is in any lease or sales document, to make sure that the people coming in are at least aware or somewhat educated about who we are and where they are.
Right. For example, like if you're buying a condo on Folsom Street, that you should know that there's a couple of street fairs that happen every year.
Yes, yeah. There's
and other events as well.
Yeah,
And then every weekend night, I mean, that there may be, you know, things that they may not be familiar with, that they need to accept.
yes, it was not familiar where they came from.
Right, right. Yeah. So, yeah, and speaking of reopening, I was really excited to see the Eagle reopening again,
Yes.
which, I mean, if you just read the history of the Eagle and all their contributions to the broader LGBTQ community, and of course the fight against AIDS and just the living culture, the leather culture. It's just it's really kind of like ground zero, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's definitely an anchor within the district. So that was important, and we're really grateful to Supervisor Haney and Honey Mahogany for pushing the legislation for the landmark designation. I believe that's going to be finalized this month, but it's passed all the committee meetings with flying colors.
Right.
We did a lot of work with the Planning Commission, and to your point, digging up the history, the long history from I think it 82 or 83, and just how integral the Eagle had been to what was going on in the neighborhood.
Right.
I mean, I knew it. I've been a patron there for many years, but I didn't know to what extent until we were doing this research ourselves,
Hmm.
and it was impressive.
Right. Yeah, and it's of course Alex, the owner, or Lex,
Mm,
he did a lot of renovations during the shutdown,
yes,
and the
yeah,
plaza was finalized across the
yeah,
streets. Or
and the construction across the street from the plaza has pretty much completed. So all of the diverters and the construction stuff, has mostly gone away, and it looks gorgeous.
Mhm. Yeah. So, do you foresee any other landmarks in the leather culture district coming up? Either existing or former businesses that should be, landmarked.
We're looking at a couple of, there are various degrees of that. There are legacy businesses, and we actually do have a
Oh,
number
right.
of those, within the district. Uh, One company that I'm just really learning more about in the last few months in the district is Leather Etc.
Oh, right.
Who have been around for a long time, but not maybe as visible as some of the
Mhm.
other businesses. But
Right.
they've been there easily 30 years.
Oh, really? Yeah, up the street from Mr. F, which became
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
food court. But yeah, what about the bathhouses? Are we going to have any bathhouses coming back to the leather
Hopefully,
culture district?
hopefully, the legislation, went through. One of the, this is as we're developing our strategies of working with the city. We're also looking at, because we're such a kind of hodgepodge of zoning, within the district, of how does that work. There
Mhm.
was my understanding is there was a bathhouse owner that was looking at opening,
Mhm.
and the system here was just so difficult to navigate because that business doesn't fall in any of the city categories,
Mhm.
that he opened in Palm Springs instead.
Oh,
you know
interesting.
yeah, so
Well,
that's definitely one of the areas that on a policy basis we're doing some fair amount of research on, you know what is being done and what can be done,
right.
to expedite bathhouse return, basically.
Well, there's so much. I mean, we should do a special show just on the history and the future of bathhouses in San Francisco. Actually,
For sure.
that would be cool. But I'm gonna just ask you if you could just talk a little bit about upcoming events. July is normally Door Alley Street Fair, of course, or up your
Yep.
alley. And
Yep.
so what's going? I know that there's a lot of events that are being planned very hastily and or
Yes.
changed.
Yeah. I mean, as much as we were all looking forward to it, I think reopening, still took us all a little bit by surprise. Uh, Up your alley, we've been working very closely with Folsom Street on a project that I'll talk about next. But there will be the Folsom Street Marketplace on July 25th. There will be as I mentioned, Mega Hood, and new names so that people don't show up expecting Up Your Alley and Folsom Street Fair, that they're going to see something different this year.
Right.
But we are been working with both with Folsom Street and the Soma West Community Benefit District, on a monthly event called Soma Saturdays, Soma Second Saturdays.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you, perfect timing. And this Saturday is the next one, and we encourage you to come by. It's a vendor and artisan, fair. We started off small in May. We tripled in size last month, and we expect, it to be even larger with about 18 to 20 vendors this time around. It's on Folsom between 9th and 10th, plus the Spur of Dory. So the powerhouse is kind of our anchor, and like Folsom Street, we are not serving alcohol or food at the event because we want to drive that business to the local businesses. So get your drink at Powerhouse or Hole in the Wall, go across the street to a Zukar Lounge for something to eat. We want the patronage going there.
Right.
I will do a plug on this one. We are still in need of volunteers for this. So you can, a manager at sflcd.org comes directly to me. So if you are interested, we have shifts from 11:30 to 2:30 and 2 to 5. And we would love to have you on board because we're going to be doing a lot more events in the coming weeks and months.
And the Leather Walk is back, right?
The Leather Walk is back. We're still working out details, but PRC has generously agreed to let the district bring Leather Walk back. It will be on September 19th. Details TBD, but it's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting to have it back. It's going to be a brand new route, and we'll be announcing a launch party for that very soon, before the end of the month.
And so, for more information about this or any other events, sflcd.org. And we have just a couple minutes left, Cal, and I'm sorry about our short format, but
that's fine.
Can you talk to me just for a minute about, what do you see as the future for the Leather Cultural District? What are the priorities going forward?
Yeah, and like I said, I think we've been working on survival for the last year and a half. Now I think we moved from surviving to thriving. Of getting the businesses back on their feet. They're reopened, but many of them still are carrying a lot of debt from the last year. So they're in need of folks to come spend their bucks there. And as I said, with the business incubator, we want to be bringing new businesses in. What we would really, what's becoming clear to a lot of the cultural districts is that the only way to be sure you're not displaced is to actually own land. So we're, our long range prospects, it's not easy, obviously, in this real estate market, but we do hope to have a community center in Soma, where artists can show, where people can gather, where events can take place. Folsom Street is opening a very nice space just north of the district on 9th and Minnow. It's gorgeous, so there'll be more live events there. But we want to go even further eventually with a leather-oriented community center.
Great. Well, I know that you're just getting started with you've been around for a little while now, but just getting started with planning for the future, and it's an exciting time.
Yes.
Coming out of this pandemic, which has been so dark and so stressful and challenging for folks. But I just wish you the best of luck, and everyone in the district and all the businesses for keeping that history alive and the culture moving forward.
Great. Well, thank you. This is so much fun to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's do it again, Cal.
Yes, anytime.
Okay. See you soon, I hope. Maybe at the
Jerry.
Eagle. Okay.
Yes, at the Eagle.
Okay. Let's meet up. Bye.
Bye.